Okay, so you're at the grocery store just trying to pick out some cooking oil, right? Avocado oil, coconut, olive. They all sound healthy enough, but
There's so many choices now.
exactly. It's like, how do you even know what's actually good for you these days?
Right.
And we've all heard the thing about switching out saturated fats for polyunsaturated fats for your heart.
Yeah.
But is that really the whole story?
Good question.
Well, today's deep dive is all about a study that kind of threw a wrench in what we thought we knew about all that. Good fats versus bad fats. It's called the Sydney Diet Heart Study, the SDHS,
Oh, yeah, the SDHS.
and it was done way back in the 60s and 70s, but
This study was huge, really groundbreaking.
really.
Yeah, it had some seriously surprising findings, even now.
I mean, it must have been pretty cutting edge back then.
For sure, and what's really interesting is it wasn't even about preventing heart disease in the first place. They were looking at what we call secondary prevention.
So trying to figure out how to help people who already had heart problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So they found 458 men in Australia, all of whom had some kind of recent heart issue, and split them into two groups.
Okay.
One group was told to cut back on saturated fat, which makes sense, but then they replaced it with, get this, a specific type of polyunsaturated fat called omega-6 linoleic acid.
Okay, so not all polyunsaturated fats are the same then.
Right, and the other group, they didn't get any specific diet advice.
Sure. Sounds like a pretty typical study so far, right?
Oh,
I have a feeling there's a but coming.
pretty much. Here's the thing. The omega-6 they used, safflower oil,
A flour oil, okay.
which back then it was like the health food oil.
Really?
Yeah, it was all the rage because it's almost pure omega-6 linoleic acid.
Okay, so what's the problem?
The men who upped their omega-6, they actually had higher rates of death from, well, everything, but especially heart disease.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
The guys who were eating less saturated fat were more likely to die from heart disease.
Compared to the group that didn't change their diet at all, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a small difference either. Their risk was significantly higher.
So how is that even possible?
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense.
right. That's what they thought. It's like, how could a healthy fat be anything but healthy?
Yeah.
That's the million-dollar question, and the answer is, well, it's complicated. Our bodies are really complex, and when we eat omega-6 linoleic acid, it turns out our bodies can change it into these compounds called, get ready for this, oxidized linoleic acid metabolites, or all X-lams.
Lycoslams.
Catchy, right?
Not exactly something you'd want to order at a restaurant, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. But basically, you can think of oxlams like rust, but for your arteries.
Rust.
Ew. Yeah, not great. And just like rust weakens metal, oxlams can damage your blood vessels, and that makes them more likely to get blocked up.
So more omega-6, more of this rust in your arteries.
Potentially, yeah. And that's what the researchers think might have happened as a DHS. All that extra omega-6, especially all coming from just safflower oil, it might have basically overloaded their systems with these potentially harmful oxlams.
Okay, so this healthy fat might actually have kind of backfired.
It seems that way.
But I mean, don't go throwing out all your olive oil just yet, people. Let's break this down a little more before we have everyone panicking.
Yeah, good idea.
So, safflower oil is the bad guy here. What about all the other stuff we hear about, like olive oil, avocados? Those are all good, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes this so interesting. The SDHS doesn't mean all omega-6 is bad. It's just that, well, context matters.
Okay.
Like olive oil, avocados, nuts, fatty fish, those all have some omega-6s too.
Right.
But they come with a bunch of other good stuff too, like antioxidants, other nutrients.
So it's not just about the type of fat, but what else comes along with it?
Exactly. And don't forget about mixing it up, you know?
Yeah, eating a variety of food.
Right. Don't just eat loads of one thing. That's never a good idea.
Makes sense. So this study from way back when really changed things up, at least for people who were following this stuff back then. But should we all be running away from omega-6 now?
I wouldn't say that. It's all about balance, remember? The SDHS got a ton of research going, and we've learned a lot since then, but we're still figuring out all the details about dietary fat and our hearts.
So no need to panic just yet.
Definitely not.
But it does make you think twice about just assuming things are healthy, you know,
Yeah, for sure. It's important to stay informed and be aware of what you're eating.
and get advice if you need it.
Absolutely. We're all different. Our bodies all have different needs.
Right. One size fits all doesn't really work for diets.
Exactly. Working with a doctor or a registered dietitian is always a good idea.
Yeah, they can actually figure out what you need, not just some general advice. So we've talked a lot about the SDHS and its surprising results. But anything else from the study itself stand out to you?
One thing that impressed me was how much effort they put into looking at other things that could have affected the results.
Like what people were doing outside of just the diet, like exercise, if they smoked, all that.
Exactly. They tracked all of that alongside their diet, and they found some interesting patterns.
Like what?
Well, for example, they found that the link between higher omega-6 intake and negative outcomes was way stronger in people who also smoked or drank alcohol regularly.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Right. It just goes to show it's not just what you eat, it's your whole lifestyle.
It's like a chain reaction. Everything affects everything else.
Right. And the SDHS really makes you realize how important context is when it comes to diet and health.
No doubt about that. This has really been an eye-opening deep dive into the world of fat. So we've learned a lot about this study. Really makes you think. What would you say is like the main thing you want people to take away from the SDHS?
It really just shows how much we're still learning, The SDHS was huge, but it's just one study, one part of a much bigger picture.
Like a snapshot in time almost.
Right. And who knows? Maybe there are other things we think are healthy now, but in 50 years, we'll look back and be like, what were we thinking?
Okay, yeah, that's actually kind of exciting though, right? Like so much more to discover.
Definitely. There's always more to learn, and that's what makes this field so fascinating.
Absolutely. But I think we've given everyone enough to think about for now.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, just imagine trying to explain all this back in the 70s, right? People would have thought we were crazy.
Right. You mean that heart-healthy margarine isn't actually good for you?
Exactly. It's amazing how much things have changed. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? To keep digging and keep asking those questions.
Absolutely. Never stop questioning what you think you know.
That's some good advice right there.
Yeah.
All right, well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Sydney Diet Heart Study and the world of dietary fats.
It was a good one.
It really was. So much to think about. And who knows, maybe it'll even change some of our listeners' shopping lists.
I hope so. Got to make those healthy choices.
Exactly. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the world of health and nutrition.